Okay, I want to start this episode with a show of hands. Figuratively, obviously, because this is audio, but how many of us have started a diet on a Monday, felt amazing for 4 days, eaten one thing we weren't supposed to, and then thought, well, I've already ruined it. Might as well start again next Monday.
I think that describes more people than would ever admit it out loud.
I've done it more times than I can count. I'd be really disciplined for a week, maybe two, and then one meal would set off this whole spiral. And then I'd feel guilty, and the guilt would make me eat more. And somehow I'd end up worse off than before I started.
And here's the thing that most people don't realize. That spiral isn't a character flaw. It's not a lack of willpower. It's actually a completely predictable response to the way most diets are designed.
So the diet is setting us up to fail?
In many cases. Yes. And today we're going to get into exactly why, and more importantly, what actually does work for long-term sustainable change.
I really needed this episode. Let's go. Welcome to Clarity and Coins, the show about money, mindset, health, and everything in between.
I'm Alex.
And I'm Jamie. Today, we're on the health pillar. And this is a topic that I think a lot of people have very complicated, very personal feelings about. Diets, eating, and why it's so hard to make lasting changes in this area.
And I want to be upfront about something before we dive in. This episode isn't about telling you what to eat. We're not going to prescribe a specific plan, count calories on air, or recommend one diet over another. What we're going to do is look at the patterns, the psychological and biological reasons why diets fail, so you can understand your own experience and make smarter decisions from there.
That's such an important distinction, because I think so many of us have spent years looking for the right diet, the right plan, the right rules to follow, when actually the problem isn't which rules we're following. It's something deeper than that.
Exactly. We're going to cover 5 reasons most diets fail, and then end with what the evidence actually points to when it comes to sustainable change. Let's get into it. Point 1. And this is the foundation everything else builds on. Most diets treat symptoms instead of causes. They give you a list of foods to eat and foods to avoid. And then they leave you to figure out the rest on your own.
What do you mean by symptoms versus causes?
So the symptom is what you're eating. The cause is why you're eating it. And the why is almost never addressed in a traditional diet plan. Why do people overeat? Why do people reach for certain foods when they're stressed? Why do people skip meals when they're busy, then eat too much later? A diet that gives you a meal plan doesn't answer any of those questions.
That makes a lot of sense. For me personally, I eat very differently depending on how I'm feeling emotionally. If I'm stressed or tired, I reach for completely different things than when I'm in a good headspace. And no diet I've ever tried addressed that.
And that's incredibly common. Food is deeply tied to mood, stress, social situations, boredom, celebration, all of it. It's not just fuel, it's comfort, it's culture, it's habit, it's memory. And a diet plan that says eat this, not that, ignores all of that completely.
So the plan might work in theory on a spreadsheet, but real life gets in the way.
Always, and there's another layer to this. Restriction itself creates a psychological response. When something is labeled off limits, it tends to become more desirable, not less. You probably experienced this yourself. You decide you're not going to eat bread this week. And suddenly all you can think about is bread.
Oh, absolutely. The moment something becomes forbidden, it has this magnetic pull that it never had before. I could go weeks without thinking about crisps, but the moment I say I'm cutting them out, I want them constantly.
That's not weakness, that's how the brain works. Restriction triggers a scarcity response. Your attention gets drawn toward the thing you've declared unavailable because the brain interprets unavailable as important. It's the same reason we want what we can't have in so many areas of life.
That is a really uncomfortable truth to hear, but it also explains so much about my history with diets.
And once you understand that mechanism, you can start working with it instead of against it, which is something we'll come back to later in the episode.
Okay, point 2. And you already touched on this in the hook, but I want to go deeper because I think this one destroys more diets than anything else. The all-or-nothing mindset.
This is probably the #1 reason people give up on healthy eating. Not because they failed dramatically, but because they had one small slip and then decided the whole thing was ruined.
The "I've already ruined it" thought, I know it so well. It's like I had one biscuit at 3 o'clock. And now somehow that becomes an excuse to order takeaway for dinner because the day's already gone anyway.
And that leap from one biscuit to a completely abandoned day is the all-or-nothing trap in action. The logic feels real in the moment, but it doesn't actually hold up. One meal cannot undo a week of good choices. Mathematically, logically, biologically. It just can't, but the all-or-nothing mindset doesn't operate on logic. It operates on feelings.
It feels like a failure, so you treat it like one, even when objectively it isn't.
Exactly, and the feeling is often guilt. You ate something you shouldn't have, you feel guilty, and guilt is an incredibly uncomfortable emotion to sit with. So what does the brain do? It looks for relief. And in that moment, the easiest relief is more food, specifically the foods that were off limits. Because eating them feels like leaning into the failure rather than fighting it.
That guilt-seeding cycle is so real, and it's so hard to interrupt once it starts.
Here's a reframe that helps. Imagine you're walking to work and you trip. Do you then lie on the ground for the rest of the day because you've already fallen and the walk is ruined? Of course not. You stand up and keep walking. One stumble doesn't end the journey. The same logic applies to eating. One meal, one day, even one whole week off track does not cancel out months of progress.
The trip analogy is really good because when you put it that way, lying down for the rest of the day sounds completely absurd. But that's literally what the all-or-nothing mindset tells us to do with food.
The goal isn't perfection. The goal is consistency over time. And consistency doesn't mean getting it right every single day. It means getting it right most days. And recovering quickly when you don't. The people who make lasting changes aren't the ones who never slip. They're the ones who don't let a slip become a story about who they are.
That last sentence, that's really something. A slip becomes a story. I've definitely done that. I'm just someone who can't stick to healthy eating, which, looking back, wasn't true at all. I just never gave myself permission to get back up after falling.
Point 3 is the one that I think genuinely surprises people because it's biological. When you go on a restrictive diet, your body doesn't just quietly cooperate. It actively fights back.
Wait, what do you mean by fights back? Like physically?
Physically. Yes. Here's what happens. When you significantly reduce how much you're eating, your body reads that as a potential threat to survival. It doesn't know you're on a diet by choice. It just knows food intake has dropped dramatically. So it responds the way it's evolved to respond over thousands of years. It slows down your metabolism to conserve energy, and it increases hunger signals to motivate you to eat more.
So the more I diet, the hungrier I get? That's the opposite of what I'd hoped for.
That's exactly what happens. There's a hormone called ghrelin, often called the hunger hormone, and its levels increase when you're in a calorie deficit. At the same time, levels of leptin, the hormone that signals fullness and satisfaction, tend to decrease, so you're simultaneously more hungry and less satisfied by the food you do eat. Your body is working against the diet.
That explains so much about week 3 of any diet I've ever tried. The first few days feel manageable, maybe even energizing. And then suddenly, around 2 or 3 weeks in, it gets dramatically harder. I'd always assumed I was just losing motivation. But this sounds like it's actually my body ramping up its resistance.
That's a really accurate way to describe it. The body is adaptive. When it senses a sustained reduction in calories, it adjusts its own energy expenditure downward to match. So you might burn fewer calories doing the same activities than you did before the diet started. This is sometimes called metabolic adaptation, and it's one of the main reasons why weight loss tends to plateau or slow down after the initial weeks, even when people are sticking to the plan.
So the diet is working against your own biology. And then when people inevitably break and eat something bad, the body is primed to store it more efficiently because it's been in conservation mode.
That's a simplified version of it, but broadly, yes. The body's priority is survival, not aesthetics. And this is really important to understand. Struggling with a very restrictive diet is not a weakness. It is your body doing exactly what bodies are designed to do. Framing it as a personal failure is not just inaccurate, it's actually counterproductive, because it triggers the guilt cycle we just talked about in point 2.
I genuinely wish I'd known this years ago. I spent so much time feeling like something was wrong with me for not being able to stick to strict diets, when actually my body was just doing its job.
And knowing this changes the strategy. Instead of going to war with your biology through extreme restriction, you work with it. Small gradual changes that don't trigger the same alarm response. We'll get into the practical side of that shortly.
Okay, let's just pause here for a moment, because the first 3 points are already a lot to sit with. So, diets tend to treat the symptom of what you're eating instead of the cause of why. They breed an all-or-nothing mindset that makes one slip feel like total failure. And biologically, extreme restriction actually triggers your body to fight back harder. None of these are things most diet plans warn you about.
Right? And none of them are your fault. They're structural problems with the diet model itself. 2 more to go, and these are where we start talking about what to do differently. Point 4 is one that I think most people underestimate massively, and is also one of the most actionable things in this episode. Your environment has more influence over what you eat than your willpower does.
That's a big claim. Can you break that down?
Sure, willpower is real, but it's a finite resource. Think of it like a battery. You start the day with a full charge, and every decision you make throughout the day drains it a little. Work decisions, social decisions, stress. Managing your schedule. By the evening, many people are running low on willpower. And that's exactly when food decisions tend to go sideways.
That explains why I am absolutely fine with food choices during the morning and early afternoon. But by 8 or 9 at night, my resistance is basically zero.
Almost everyone experiences that pattern, and the traditional diet advice of just use more willpower ignores the fact that willpower is exhausted by that point. So instead of relying on willpower, the smarter move is to design your environment so that the default, the easy choice, the path of least resistance, is also the healthier choice.
So you're engineering the situation rather than fighting it with sheer force of character.
Exactly, and this is sometimes called the friction principle. You increase friction around choices you want to make less often, and you reduce friction around choices you want to make more often. It sounds abstract. So let me make it very practical. What's sitting on your kitchen counter right now?
Honestly, there's usually a fruit bowl, but there's also almost always a biscuit tin. And I think we can all guess which one I reach for more often at the end of a long day.
Right? The biscuit tin is zero friction. It's visible, it's accessible, you don't have to prepare anything, you don't even have to think. The fruit is slightly more friction, you have to peel it, maybe wash it. That tiny gap in effort makes a real difference when your willpower battery is low. Now imagine the biscuit tin is in a high cupboard, and the fruit is pre-washed and sitting at eye level in the fridge. You haven't banned anything. You've just adjusted the friction.
That is such a simple idea. And I genuinely think it would work because the biscuits aren't forbidden, they're just slightly less convenient. So there's no guilt around choosing them, but the default nudges you in a better direction.
That's the key. You're not using restriction, you're using design. And this extends beyond just what's on your counter. It includes what you keep in the fridge, whether you meal prep on Sundays so healthy food is ready to grab during the week, even the social environment around food, whether the people you eat with most often support or undermine the choices you're trying to make.
The social piece is real. It's so much easier to make good choices when the people around you are doing similar things. And it can be really hard when you're surrounded by people who treat every healthy choice as an inconvenience or something to comment on.
That's worth acknowledging. Your environment includes people. You don't have to cut anyone out of your life. But being aware of which environments make certain choices easier or harder is genuinely useful information.
And the fifth point, which I have a feeling is going to be the most different from anything a typical diet plan would say.
It might be. Here it is. Lasting change comes from identity, not rules. Most diets give you rules. Eat this. Don't eat that. Count these numbers. Follow this plan. But rules are external. They come from outside. And the moment the rules stop, the plan ends, the challenge finishes, the app subscription lapses, the behavior tends to stop too. Because the person never changed. Only the rules did.
So what's the alternative to rules?
Identity. The question isn't, what do I need to eat on this plan? The question becomes, What kind of person am I becoming? There's a meaningful difference between saying, I'm trying to eat less sugar and saying, I'm someone who takes care of what I put into my body. One sounds like a temporary restriction. The other sounds like who you are.
When you put it that way, I can feel how different those two things feel. I'm on a no-sugar diet, sounds exhausting and temporary. I'm someone who doesn't really do sugar, sounds almost effortless, like it's just how that person is.
And the path from the first to the second isn't about willpower or discipline. It's about small, consistent actions that accumulate evidence. Every time you make a choice that aligns with the person you want to be, you're casting a vote for that identity. One vote doesn't decide an election, but hundreds of votes over time do. And over time, the identity starts to feel real, not because you forced it, but because your own actions proved it to you.
So, you build the identity through the small choices, not the other way around. You don't wait until you feel like a healthy person before acting like one. You act like one in small ways, and eventually, you become one.
That's it. And this is also why the all-or-nothing trap is so destructive, because every time you break a rule and say I've ruined it, you're also reinforcing a negative identity. You're telling yourself a story. I'm someone who can't stick to things. The reframe isn't just about the food. It's about what story you're telling yourself with every choice.
So even the recovery matters. Getting back on track after a slip isn't just a practical thing, it's an identity statement. I'm someone who bounces back.
Perfectly said. That's exactly the shit that makes a difference long-term.
Okay, so let's land this. We've talked about 5 reasons diets fail. They treat symptoms, not causes. They breed all-or-nothing thinking. The body fights back against restriction, environment beats willpower, and rules don't create lasting change the way identity does. So what's the practical step? What does someone do tomorrow?
2 things, and they're both small on purpose.
Go on.
The first is an environment audit. Just take 5 minutes and look at your kitchen, your counter, your fridge, your cupboards. Ask yourself, what's the most visible and accessible thing in here? What does the path of least resistance lead to when I'm tired and hungry and have zero decision-making energy left? Then make one change, just one. Move one thing. Add one thing. Remove one thing from easy reach. That's it.
I'm going to move my biscuit tin after this episode. That's my one thing.
Perfect. The second thing is an identity sentence. Write down, even just in your phone's notes app, how you want to see yourself around food. Not what you want to achieve. Who you want to be. Start it with the words I'm someone who, and finish it honestly. Not aspirational, not perfectly, just truthfully. Even if it's I'm someone who's learning to make better choices. That's a completely valid identity to build from.
And then every small choice you make that lines up with that sentence is a vote for it. Even eating one more piece of fruit this week counts.
Every single one counts. This is not about transformation overnight. It's about direction. Are your choices today pointing toward the person you said you want to be? That's the only question that actually matters.
I love that. Direction, not destination. You're not trying to arrive at some perfect version of yourself all at once. You're just making sure you're moving the right way.
That's a wrap on episode 3 of Clarity and Coins. If you've spent years blaming yourself for not being able to stick to diets, I hope this episode gave you a different way to look at that history. Because the problem was almost never you, it was the approach.
If this resonated with you, share it with someone who's been stuck in the diet cycle. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. We've got new episodes coming every week on money, mindset, health, and self-improvement.
Remember, clarity is the first coin.
See you in the next one.